Welcome to Journey with the Jays on Real 1100, Facebook Live, and YouTube. Tonight we're joined by former running back Greg Bell of the Buffalo Bills, Los Angeles Rams, and Raiders. Greg, welcome to Journey with the Jays.
Hey, nice being here with the Jays.
A pleasure having you. So,
JB, Spenser, I don't know what the J is for you, but you'll tell me at some point.
It's Journey with the Jays. I'm the S right after the J. That's me.
That's what it means. Okay.
So let's start out with –
didn't get me there quick enough.
Let's start out with the huge win for Notre Dame. You're a Notre Dame graduate. You played there. They had a huge win this week against Clemson. What'd you think about it?
You know what? I predicted that we would win probably I thought it would be by 2 touchdowns, but you have to take your hand off to the young man who's the quarterback there, DJ. It's funny. I didn't even know it was DJ, who I actually know him and his dad. They're down at Bosco, and we had a kid, DJ Morgan, who just finished up at Notre Dame, who was a big recruit out at Bosco. So I got to know the Bosco program. I remember him committing to Alabama, and then I guess somewhere along the lines he changed and decided he was going to Clemson instead. I didn't even notice it until I saw this 6'5", 240-pound monster out on the field. And then I remembered, holy geez, this is a kid that was at Bosco who, destroyed Concord de La Salle. So it was a big win for Notre Dame. I think if you look at it right now, and I hope everybody looks at it realistically, I think their quarterback, without a doubt, is the number one player in college. But I don't know if he could have done any more than what DJ did. I mean, he had a game of a century, regardless that he's a freshman, senior, whatever it is, 425 yards passing, very accurate at about 75%. You know what? Not even a first-string quarterback typically has that kind of a game. It's going to be interesting in the ACC championship game. I think that's going to be a tell-all. Hopefully Notre Dame doesn't get too overly joyed by the win and get so big-headed they walk into Boston College this week or later in the year with Syracuse and allow them to upset this run. But if both teams can come into that ACC championship game, it's going to be a great game. Hopefully we'll be over the 25%er, which doesn't look likely, but it'd be nice to see us get somewhere close to 70%, and maybe we could fill the stands up. And unlike our president, we'll storm the field with social distancing.
Brian Kelly has been the coach there for 6 years, Greg. What do you think of the job that he's done for Notre Dame up to this point, especially this season?
Has it only been 6 years that Kelly's been there?
Oh, I'm sorry, 10 years, 2010 to present.
Wait a minute,
You're right, 10 years.
A decade. You know what? It's for me, it's been a little plus and minus. The minus basically is, we had probably one of the best college coaches of all time, Lou Holtz, who, when he got to the decade point, they kind of put a lot of pressure on him to step down. Brian Kelly's done a great job. I think his biggest hurdle is he's not the greatest recruiter. So you don't see the 5-star kids running to Notre Dame like back in the 80s when we were there. It's one of those things where hopefully kids see that, one, as a freshman, you can come in and contribute. He's got a lot of freshmen contributing on that team right now. I think a lot of times kids come to Notre Dame and they kind of get disenchanted because they know the academics are going to be hard. They're going to be focused on that side of their life, but sometimes it's hard to get on the field. A lot of these kids want to get into the NFL early, which I don't blame them. That's going to be hopefully games like this. And, if they can go on and win the ACC this year, it'll help them with the recruiting, because I'm going to just tell you that, I'm always shocked that when I see a lot of these 5-star kids, they go and they end up at some other school that is nowhere at the same level of a Notre Dame, when they could have been at Notre Dame and actually playing as a freshman.
Jake, you had a question?
Yeah, no. I just wanted to know. I mean, look, you've been through college, you've gone to the pros. What is your best advice for not just the big stars like Trevor Lawrence, but anybody that's, any of the guys that are looking to go to the NFL possibly? What's your advice from transitioning to college to the NFL, preparing for that, anything like that?
Stop thinking of it. That's I host, I work with about, close to 4,000 or 5,000 kids a year. We've over the 30 years that my foundation has been serving Southern California and San Bernardino and Riverside County. We've had probably 18 kids go into the National Football League. Kenny Clark, Nate Metters, Alexander Madison, DeMonte Kazi. Those are some of the kids who've come through our program. I tell all of them they're never going to make it. And that's probably the best advice I can give any of them. When you're looking for your college, I tell all of them, look for the college that best fits you, not necessarily which has the best athletic program, because you could go in and on the first play of your career, you could blow your knee out, blow your back out. You can never play one down after that. What are you going to do from that point forward? I was able to graduate from Notre Dame in 3 years, start my master's. I've got my master's. The biggest thing that probably helped me more than anything, believe it or not, is I did a 360 and my foot stayed in the ground and I tore my tibia and my fibia and all the ligaments, and I had to have reconstructive surgery. And as I laid in that bed, it was a come to Jesus. And literally when I say come to Jesus, it was a conversation between me and God. And it was like, you haven't been doing what you promised me you do. And so until you do your part, I'm not going to do my part. And basically I was being a C student, just trying to get on the field playing. Of course, I had a great sophomore season, and come the junior year, the fourth game of the season against Purdue, it was gone. And they told me at that point I'd probably never play again. I broke my ankle on my growth plate, so it was the doctors were hemming and hawing. They just said, we're not sure if you'll ever play again, Miss Bell. And so it became the reason that I should have gone there for in the first place, was to get a degree that would lead me to be a businessman, to do the things that I wanted to do and further my life. Because more importantly, what these kids have to know more than anything is that football is only really, truly, and I say this, and not to say that I was blessed to play 8-9 years, but it's really a 3 to 4 year career for most guys, because you really put your most mature years, you're putting in college. Even though you're not getting paid for it, think of what Trevor Lawrence has done over the last 2 to 3 years. Think how much money he's lost just sitting in college. And now he's going to go to the pros at 22, 23 years old, and his career might be done when he's 27, 28. I was fortunate enough to retire at 30. I mean, I look at Frank Gore right now, and I just sit there and say, man, the old man is doing it up, and he's going to make enough bank that he'll never have to worry about another job after he leaves. But we weren't that fortunate in the early 80s. I'm from that last generation where guys actually in the offseason actually went and did something else other than prepare for football. Probably about 91, after the Reggie White settlement, that's when guys actually could prepare year round for football. Before then, it was about, what else are you preparing yourself for? So I went back and was going to school and getting my master's and things of that nature to prepare myself for what was going to come afterwards, not knowing if I would make it through the season 8, season 9. You just never know. So that's the biggest advice I give kids, because 99.99% of them will never play one down in the National Football League. And that's, just think of every man that walks on this court. I tell people this, it's the greatest story I think I could ever give a kid. Every man who walks on this earth probably dreams of playing on Sunday, more so than shooting the basketball, because they know they're not 7 foot, more so than swinging a golf club, because let's be honest, that ball controls you. They all have an envision, because football has grown to be the most popular sport in the United States. We all dream about it. And then I've been in foreign countries where they get in awe of it, because they think we're so big, and it's amazing that these big guys can run this fast. So men all over the world dream of this. That's millions and millions, like somewhere close to 20, 30 million people. And only, I think in the history of the game, it's less than 15 or 16,000, the history of the game. So don't dream about playing on Sunday, because it's not really a realistic dream. But if you do, which I'm always happy, when one of my guys comes back and says, oh, Mr. Bell, by the way, you're wrong. I did make it. the thing that warms my heart probably more than anything. I'm happy when they come back and tell me I did make it, because it's a beautiful thing, man, to live your dream. It really is.
Now, what advice would you give them as far as coming back from major injuries? Because you did that a couple of times. How did you mentally prepare for that?
Well, I mean, I can't bestow my faith on anyone other than myself. My dad was a Baptist minister. My family was raised in the church, so I had a lot of faith in God. I never worried about coming back because God was always my answer. He was my beginning and my end. So I just prayed properly and I asked him and he answered me. If I do what you want, you do what I want. You know, it was one of those things where I knew I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do properly in college. So when I shredded my ankle in college, that was just I already had the faith. I mean, it was no question whether I was going to come back. The question was how fast I was going to come back. And I probably came back faster than I needed to. When I tore my abdomen in the NFL and got forced into splits, I hate to say, when you're a track guy, you tear muscles. So that never gave me a lot of fear. It hampered me for about a year and a half. I wasn't quite right, but once I had the right medical team, which was I was thankful to God that He sent me to Los Angeles, because at that time the best medical team in the country was Dr. Curlin and Clarence Shield. And the first time he looked at my injury, he says, "I'll heal it. You'll be fine. You just give me the performance on the field." So then it was an agreement between me and Doc.
So what does Notre Dame have to do to win the national championship this year?
That's a great question. I haven't seen enough of Alabama or Ohio State. I think nobody's seen enough of Ohio State to know. Ohio State really, at this point, they've got to worry more about Indiana than they do Notre Dame and Alabama. Indiana, I've watched them twice now, and they're a pretty darn good team. They run the ball well. They create turnovers, and I think when you start thinking about Notre Dame, what they have to do, number one thing they have to do is play strong defense. And I think that's anybody who thinks they're going to walk in and play Notre Dame and just walk through their defense is going to probably be a lot more surprised that this is a different type of Fighting Irish defense. I think that's been their weakest link of Kelly's regime, and now it's probably his strongest, and hopefully it stays his strongest. I think they're going to be a little shocked by the speed of the running backs. They're not as big as the running backs we've had in the past, but they're a little bit more speedier, a little bit more shiftier, and that may be what we need from for the scheme that we're running. I'm not a big spread guy. I don't like the spread system whatsoever. My last couple of years in the league with the Raiders, we were going to it, and for a traditional downhill running back, it just puts your shoulders the way they were taught us never to have your shoulders. Their shoulders are east and west. We were taught to always have your shoulders pointing north and south if you want to run with force. So, it takes a different kind of running back to play in a spread. I was effective in it, but I really never fell in love with it. Ian Book's going to have to play well the remainder of the season. He's going to have to play like he did last week. I'll be honest, I haven't been a big Ian Book supporter this year. Phil Jerkowitz, I think that's how it's pronounced, or Nurkowitz or something of that nature, who's at Boston College, unfortunately, this weekend. We'll see the kid who was, 2 years ago, he was the number one player in the country coming out of just outside of Aliquippa. And he goes to Notre Dame, and this kid's got a big arm. He's a big, stout of a kid, 6'4". I thought this was going to be, the next guy who replaces Ian Book when he left. Ian Book comes back from a fifth year, and the kid said it. He said he hated leaving to go to Boston College, but he had to get on the field. And that's what a lot of these kids are just trying to do. They're trying to get on the field. And, when guys are staying 4 and 5 years, it doesn't always hurt. It doesn't hurt the program, but it doesn't help the program either, because it runs a lot of guys away from them who are, they're interested to get on the field. And, trust me, you watch. We've already got a commitment from the number one quarterback in the country. I think that kid's out of North Carolina, somewhere on the East Coast. And you watch, we're going to probably get two more the number 2 and 3 guys are going to be looking at Notre Dame as well, because there is no backup after Ian Book. So all of a sudden now there's going to be a freshman who's going to be coming in, and he's going to be playing at Notre Dame next year, and he's probably going to start for 4 years or 3 years and leave. But that's something that we've got to get ourselves beyond. You know, when I played at Notre Dame, there was no fifth-year seniors. The first one ever in the history was a gentleman named Kevin Griffin, who he was hurt 3 of his 5 years at Notre Dame. When I came in as a freshman, he was a fifth-year senior, and Kevin stayed because he was just, he's just a great person. He was going into med school, ended up transferring, finishing, and going to law school, and as a lawyer back in Columbus, Ohio, just by chance. But he was the first one in the history of Notre Dame, and that was in 1980. Think of that. I mean, there were a lot of schools who had fifth year because they were, signing a lot of junior college transfers. So that's one of the things that Notre Dame is going to have to look into. I mean, Ian's got to play lights out football the rest of this year, and the defense just really has to continue doing what they're doing. And I think we got a really great shot of playing for the national championship. But in order to beat an Alabama, to beat a Ohio State that I'm seeing right now, or to beat a Clemson, you got to remember Clemson. They did some uncanny things. I mean, how do you pronounce this kid's name? Intuit, the running back. What's the running back's last name?
Etienne.
Etienne. I mean, 2 weeks in a row, he's made the same fumble. I mean, that's not characteristic of him. And the quarterback's not going to make too many mistakes. So, I've seen Clemson play on a big stage, and I've seen Notre Dame not play on a big stage. So Notre Dame's got to be prepared to play on the big stage, and they got to have a performance like they did last week the rest of the year. And I think they have the ability to play like that. My probably biggest concern with Notre Dame right now is what's going to happen between yesterday and today, because I'm sure yesterday, today, and tomorrow, all of those students who went on the field and all the Clemson team and all the Notre Dame team, they're probably taking their rapid test right now to find out whether anybody became positive. So that's probably the biggest hiccup. Outside of that, I think Notre Dame's playing at a high level, and they're going to do well the rest of the year.
So, Greg, I have a question for you. Since you played a long time ago, and the game's a little bit different today, I'm curious your thoughts on athletes getting paid potentially for the likeness of their name. This is something I've been in favor of. I feel like athletes should get paid. The NCAA makes a lot of money off these guys and the girls, not just football, but all the sports. And I know not all the players are going to start out getting paid. The bigger ones are going to. But what are your thoughts on athletes getting their due compensation?
Well, I'm happy for the athletes. Anytime a person gets compensated for their worth, you can't help but be happy for them. Let me go kind of take you back to 1980. I was so high on myself, my friends would have told you Greg Bell thought coming out of high school he could play in the pros. I couldn't. Mentally, the game was too fast for me. I learned it. It took me about 2 years. By my third year at Notre Dame, I think I could have went into the pros, and I probably could have had the same career I had today. Most of the time when you look at the difference between football, basketball, baseball, track, and all the other things, football is the only one that you can put one thing, and one thing is consistent. It's physical stature. The rest of the games, you don't have to have a physical stature. I mean, Kevin Durant will never be any bigger than a stick, and he's still going to be Kevin Durant. He probably about 10 pounds more than what he was in high school. And he's been playing, 8 or 9 years right now? It doesn't make a difference in the game of basketball. Track, it doesn't make a difference. Baseball, if you're playing in a position like first base where, it's about arm development in baseball, and you don't have to be big to throw the ball. So football is the only one where I think physical size and speed, and it has to work together with the mental side of it. And everything has got to be working at a fast pace. So it's some development that, that I will admit that, was I ready to play in the NFL coming out of high school? No. Was I big enough? I was 195 pounds. Yeah, I probably was big enough, but I wasn't physically developed enough to play in the pros, because I was a poor pass blocker. They would have just ran through me in high school because all I did was run the ball. I had to learn how to block. Heck, I had to learn how to cut. I wasn't blocking anybody. I was going to cut everybody. So that's the only thing that separates all the other sports. So, for a lot of these guys, there are very few guys that were the size of Herschel or Bo Jackson that could walk into the NFL and play coming out of high school. 220-pound backs coming out of high school. So those are far and few between. For these guys to start getting compensated, especially when you start thinking of it, there are some guys. There was a running back. I hope one of you guys will remember his name. I just remember him being a phenomenal running back coming out of South Carolina, and he went to South Carolina about 6 or 7 years ago, blew his knee out after his sophomore year, and then blew his knee out his senior year. And he was a great high school running back. He was a great freshman. He was freshman All-American. And here's a kid who now is working for South Carolina. He helped turn their program around. Lou Holtz loved him. Lou was leaving as he was coming in. And, for a kid that put so much into football to get nothing out of it.
You're talking about Marcus Lattimore, correct?
Marcus
Yeah, I absolutely love Marcus Lattimore.
Marcus was a great high school running back and a great freshman. And unfortunately, his dream never came to fruition. And so when you say a kid gets a chance to make something, everything they had in South Carolina had Marcus Lattimore's name and number on it. So here it puts him in a good position coming out of college where he can actually do something. And I say this for not a negative reason, but for a positive reason. There are a lot of these guys, and I don't mean this negative, like I said, who when they come out of school they haven't graduated, and they're nowhere near graduating. It's easier to start off in life with a pocket full of money than it is without. Trust me, I can tell you that wholeheartedly. It is much easier, and you won't be in debt. And I don't want to hear anything about the NCAA because I think that it's probably the most overblown, wasted organization that there is. More rules than regulations. If you're there to regulate, then regulate, but don't make too many unfounded rules and change them whenever you decide you want to change them, because that's not really what any sport should have. I understand who the NCAA has been. I understand who they're going to be, which is they're probably not going to be around in another 10 years, or at least 20, hopefully. When you've got mega schools like the Notre Dame SCs, they don't need a governing body to watch over them. At some point there's going to be a mega conference that's going to kind of control football. I mean, because that's all we ever talk about is football, because that's the breadwinner for every college there is. Especially for Notre Dame. They're going to govern themselves and make sure that they keep things right, because, the bottom line is that their pockets depend on. You're not going to go out and illegally recruit a kid, giving him money. Those days are, of the SMUs and I'm not going to lie, the Notre Dames and all the rest of them, they're not a college that probably hasn't offered a kid something to come there. But the thing that's going to happen is that they're going to self-monitor themselves, because this game has gotten to be so big and it's such a part of our society. They don't want to ruin it. And I think when like anything, cheating never gets anybody anything unless, of course, you live in the Northeast and you have a Patriot on the side of your helmet.
Oh man, that was an excellent way to end that, and that was very well said, Greg. We're gonna transition to the NFL. We got a lot to talk about, but I had a quick question for you. Who is an NFL running back today that you think runs like Greg Bell did in the '80s?
Oh man, you know what? Nobody runs like I didn't run like anybody else. I mean, everybody has their own style. It's too hard to look at a different running back and wonder, okay, who runs like me? I like the way Josh Jacobs runs the ball. He's a north-south runner. I mean, if you watch him, he rolls his shoulders and he keeps them going north and south most of his runs. He's not trying to beat guys to the corner. There was only one running back that I would probably tell you honestly. When I played in the game, Bo Jackson is probably the only guy who ran sweeps and who actually ran a sweep to get around the outside. I ran a sweep to cut back, and so did Marcus, and so did OJ. And, it's one of those things where sweeps were meant to be cut inside, or if you had to go outside, it's because your tight end or your tackle was able to pinch the guy inside him and you didn't have nowhere else to go. But we were, John Robinson's system was meant to bring it inside the tackle. It wasn't meant to go outside the tackle. It was a cutback, and I always looked for the cutback. So, it's really too many guys. I mean, I can't even name all the running backs that are in the NFL now. 1 week it's one guy. Todd started out like gangbusters, and Todd, people don't know how big Todd was. Todd was a 230-pound running back. I was 215 pounds. I mean, 15 doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, especially when you got big tree trunk legs like Todd has. So, it's a different. Everybody has a different style of running. When I was a kid growing up, and you say, who did I want to pattern myself out? I love Walter Payton. Sweetness was the man. He was a good friend. I love talking with him. I miss him. It's one of those things where I liked it because he never went out of bounds. He ran hard every time, and so when I ran the ball, I didn't have his style. Wasn't going to be as sweet as he was, but I didn't want one guy to bring me down. And I wanted to make sure if when I hit somebody, they got as much of the hit as I did. And I don't care if it was a defensive tackle and I hit him in his chest. I wanted him to know he was tackling. And he had to wrap his arms around me, or else I'm going to break loose and I'm going to keep going. So, the game has changed a lot. Like I said, when backs aren't coming downhill, it's just a whole different thing. It's easier to trip up a back because his shoulders are east and west. Whereas, we came downhill. And it was really, if we saw an opening and we popped through the cut, if the linebacker missed us, then we were on our way to the next level. And, the game has changed a lot now because, like I said, the next level is just getting out of the backfield, actually, because your shoulders are already east and west.
Right.
Yeah. So, Greg, one last thing I wanted to talk to you about before we move on. I know you have your foundation. It's, I guess, a comparable thing I would describe it to is almost like a Boys and Girls Club. So, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? Tell our viewers about what you have going on.
Well, 31 years ago, I lost one of my best friends. That's another thing that I tell kids about going to college. College isn't about A's and B's, as I tell people. It's about life. It's about maturing. It's about growing. It's about the relationships you're going to have in life. And I was blessed to be a part of a gentleman's name is Stacy Turan. Stacy was like my brother. We came to Notre Dame together. He was from Broad Ripple, Indianapolis area, and I was from Columbus, Ohio. So we weren't that far away from each other. He was an all-state basketball player. I was an all-state basketball player. And we were almost going to, had my team not messed up and lost the state championship, we're going to kind of have an Indiana-Ohio game at one point. But Stacy killed himself in a drunk driving accident in August of, I want to say it was 1990 or 89, actually. And at that point, I had been a spokesperson for Governor Cuomo and for Nancy Reagan about Just Say No and Athletes Against Drunk Driving and Drug Prevention. So I created Athletes for Life in memory of Stacy at that time. And Athletes for Life, man, it's grown from being an anti-drunk driving and drug prevention program to an after-school education provider, service provider, a mentoring program, speakers bureau. We now, have our own curriculum where we put together called PASS, Passion, Attitude, Sacrifice Equals Your Success. And so it's one of those things where we work with thousands of kids each year, whether it be in the classroom or in our camps that we have. Our camp is going on. This would have been our 15th year in San Bernardino and 17th year hosting our life skill camp. But the whole thing, the message is about being a good person. And I tell people all the time, there's only one thing I can promise parents. Can't promise I'm going to make him a better athlete. Can't promise he's going to go to the pros. I can't even promise you he's going to start for his high school. But I can promise you if he listens and he matures properly, he's going to grow to be a quality tax-paying citizen by the time he's 21 years old. And that's what we try and get across to so many of the kids who have come through our program, to now a lot of them come back and become counselors after the fact, because they just love being around the kids and working with kids. And it's really about, it's kind of that, we all seen the movie Pass It Forward, pass it on. And it's one of those things, I think that's what, at some point in your life, you got to get to a point of peace, happiness amongst yourself. And then you find out there's so much more you can do with yourself, and giving somebody else less fortunate the opportunities. And so that's what we've been doing for 31 years, to believe it or not. This would have been our 31st summer. This pandemic has kind of changed the world, the way we do things. But it's pretty amazing. I mean, we work with probably just over 30 school districts around the country. I mean, I had Tua's chancellor at his high school. They were sending players from Hawaii to our camp this year. I mean, just to tell you how far-reaching. I've got a young kid out of Muskegon, Michigan, one of the top quarterbacks. Last weekend, he finished third in the Elite 11. He's coming out to the camp. The word gets out, so I'm not going to call this an Elite 11, but it's not about football all the time. That's why we call it a life skill camp. They come, they spend 1 week on a college campus. We feed them, we clothe them, and we educate them, and we mentor them. And the greatest thing about the program is that we have probably just over 25 different NFL guys: Toy Cook, Byron Chamberlain, Andre Reed. I can go through the list of the guys who have come through the program. They get a chance to become friends with these guys. And it's an amazing thing. I was blessed that when I was a kid, I got a chance to meet Wilma Rudolph, because I went to a Fellowship of Christian Athlete program. And you get a chance to talk to this person, talk to that person. I got a chance when I was young to meet Tony Dorsett, and me and Tony became lifetime friends because, he saw a young kid who looked up to him, and it's like, I want to make sure this kid does the right thing. And so Tony's always been a close part of my life, and that was mainly because of Ron Springs, who was a dear friend of Tony, who's his fullback. But Ron was a close friend of mine coming out of Ohio State. And, of course, my big brother's always been there. Somebody I could go to is guys like Archie Griffin. When you got mentors like that in your life that help you along the way, you just got to pass that on. And so that's been my life's journey. I worked for the NFL in Europe for about 4 years, and in the headquarters. And I wanted a shot at the front office. And back then, for African American, outside of Ozzie Newsome and Tony Dungy, that were, they were in the lowest of low positions. I thought I was educated. I thought I was smart enough to be a general manager. So there are certain things you want to do in life. I didn't see it happening. And so I said, I got my foundation. I'm going to put my emphasis into that. And I left New York, came home, family of 3. And I decided that was what I wanted to do. And now 31 years later, that's, I've lived my life's dream twice now. God blessed me to get back on the field, and then he blessed me to be a mentor. And being a mentor is probably the greatest job I've ever had in my life. You meet guys, like John Wooden, who tells you, Greg, I'm a mentor too. And that's what John told me was probably the most special part of his life, is that he's an opportunity to be a mentor to so many young men as well as women, because remember, he was a teacher as well. And, you hear people and you get a chance, and I understand what John was telling me years ago. And now I'm delivering that same message. It was no greater pride in my life. I can take what I did on the football field as my gift, but the gift that God gave me probably more than anything is to be a good mentor to others.
Greg, thank you so much for sharing that. We really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on Journey with the Jays. Greg Bell, former NFL and Notre Dame player. Thanks so much, man. We really appreciate it.
All right, guys.
Have a great one, Greg.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Good one, Greg.
All right.
All right, let's dive into some NFL. We got a lot to unpack. Let's start with the Monday night game. Pats-Jets. Pats came back down 10 points to win in the fourth quarter. They won the game 30-27 as time expired. So there's a few places we can go here. But I specifically want to talk about Cam Newton's performance. Now, we got about 8 games left in the season, right? 7 games left in the season? 16? Yeah, okay. Has Cam Newton shown enough to the Pats and the fans that he can be the Pats starting quarterback moving forward? If not for the Patriots, can he be the starting quarterback for another team? or does he have a lot more to show before the season ends in order to solidify that role in this league? John, let's start with you.
I don't think it's necessarily fair to put that on him yet, because the talent around him is just abysmal on that offense. The COVID stuff has just been bad. However, his performance has been inconsistent. I mean, running the ball, he's been great, but he's turned the ball over quite a bit. He only has 2 passing touchdowns. Going into the Monday night game, he only had 2 passing touchdowns on the season. So really, I mean, 2 passing touchdowns is not going to get it done in this day and age. There's guys that have that after the first quarter in week 1, and they just played week 9 and he still has 2 passing touchdowns. Like, yeah, great. The rushing touchdowns are great, but I mean, if you're throwing 2 passing touchdowns through week 9, something tells me you're not getting it done.
Yeah, it's 2 touchdowns, but it's also the fact 7 interceptions, and that's not like he missed. He's not like he didn't miss like half the season. He missed a few games. He still played 7 games. Throw 2 touchdowns, 7 games. That's every 3.5 games he's throwing 1 touchdown. He's ran, and I understand that. While that's all well and good, and I understand he doesn't have a lot around him, other guys still got it done. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, for example. Am I going to compare the 2 of them? No, but they're both not the most amazing quarterbacks in the world. And Jimmy Garoppolo is playing with similar talent levels, not a lot. Guess what? I know he did better, and I'm not comparing them, but I'm just saying when you put another quarterback that's not named Tom Brady, right? That is not this amazing quarterback in Tom Brady, of course, but another solid quarterback, a guy that we would all agree is a pretty good quarterback overall. He did better. He had better numbers, in 7 games, and I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but I guarantee in 7 games, Garoppolo would have had better numbers and probably did in that time. So for me, yeah, I get it. He doesn't have a lot of talent. But at the same time, when someone else stepped into your role, they were able to do better. And I don't know that entirely reflects on Newton, but it also doesn't make him look very good when you think about it like that.
I got to disagree with you. Cam brings a different feel to that offense where he can run. First touchdown last night was a sweep to the outside with the fake to Burkhead. It's just a different, complete offense. He doesn't have any talent around him on that offense other than Edelman, who's pretty old at this point. The backs have deteriorated. If they built some talent around him on the offense, they'd be a lot better. I can't blame Cam for any of this.
I will say this before we move on. I think that these next 8 games are the biggest of the season for Cam Newton. I mean, John said it best. He's been inconsistent. Yes, he does add another element to your offense, but he has to show me week in and week out that he can handle the pressure. The next 3 games are against the Ravens, the Texans, and the Cardinals. He ends the season playing the Chargers, the Rams, and the Dolphins. If he can pull out 3 wins in those final 6 games, yes, the Patriots will probably not make the playoffs, but he needs to show me something, because right now, if I'm another team in this league, I'm looking at what he's doing in New England, and I'm saying, okay, there are some nights where, yeah, he's great. That first game, or second game when he went head-to-head with Russell Wilson, that was awesome to watch. But then you have games like they play the Broncos, and he looks horrible. And last week he looked terrible. And this game against the Jets on Monday, guys, this was a must-win for him. Had he
barely won.
Had he lost to the 0-8 Jets, there are people in New England who would have been calling for him to not be here next year and for us to maybe get another look at Stidham, although we all know how bad he is. I want to move on and talk about the Atlanta Falcons. So, guys, look out, but they've won 3 of their last 4 games since firing Dan Quinn. And they're now 3 and they're now 3-6 under interim head coach Raheem Morris. Arthur Blank came out, owner of the Falcons, and hinted at a rebuild earlier in the season, specifically citing a possible change at the quarterback position. But Matt Ryan and the Falcons have really picked it up these last few games. 8 touchdowns for Matt Ryan in his last 4 games. Julio Jones is catching anything and everything, and they're doing an okay job of getting Gurley more featured in the offense. So should the rest of the NFL be worried about the Atlanta Falcons, or will this great play from them fizzle out down the stretch? JB?
So basically, this is what happened last year. It's the same thing, and they started this year horribly. You have to blow it up at this point because there's been too much talent for too long not to do anything. All they've done is blow a huge Super Bowl lead that they're mocked forever on. So it's done. Not if you keep Ryan, it's fine, but you got to find something else. And right now, they're doing well. All of the defense, the offense hasn't ever had a problem, but the defense is stepping up. Jake, right or wrong?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, they're playing better, and that's all well and good, but nobody's getting any younger, and this is typical of the Falcons, really. You know, they're an inconsistent team as well. And yeah, they had a good start, and it's great. I mean, they're going to do better with the new head coach. Period. End of story. Anybody that replaced Dan Quinn was almost guaranteed to be better. It was hard to be worse at that point. Dan Quinn was not doing well with that team. So being better was not an accomplishment. And maybe they're rallying around the fact that Dan Quinn's gone and new team, a new system in place, and that's all well and good. But it is time to blow it up. As much as it's going to suck, it's time to go. I mean, Matt Ryan not getting any younger, and he's still good, but he's not getting any younger. Julio Jones not getting any younger. You got to keep guys like Calvin Ridley, Todd Gurley. I mean, again, I like him, but again, still not getting any younger. And we saw, the injury problems he's had as well. There's a lot of moving parts. There's really very few players, guys like, Calvin Ridley, that are worth building around. But you got to start making this team younger to win again, because you now have the old head coach that was causing problems out. You bring in a new head coach, unless you decide to stick with your interim head coach, which I don't know if they want to do that. They could. But regardless, you have a new coach in place. You got a whole new system coming in, right? And, you rebuild that way, new culture change. That's what happens, and that's when good teams come about. When you culture change, new coaches, new players, that's the way to do it. As much as I love the Falcons, what they've been doing, it's not going to last too long, and especially against a good team. We're going to see it this weekend against the Saints. We're going to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, I have one more thing to add to this. I really do think that you got to blow this up. Jake did mention last week how quarterbacks like Matt Ryan really aren't a thing anymore. You almost have to have quarterbacks that are mobile. And I think that the problem, and it's nothing against Matt Ryan, but I think it limits the offensive coordinator in his game plan and how they do things. They can't have jet sweeps. They can't have guys in motion and RPO. They can't have things like that because you're not going to fall for it with Matt Ryan running an RPO. That stuff's not going to happen unless you have a mobile quarterback, which is where the league is going. And you have Matt Ryan. And nothing against him, but the way the league is, you almost have to go to that college style now to keep up. Because if you watch Falcons games, yeah, they can score points, but their offense is kind of predictable. The running game, predictable. When Todd Gurley comes in, you know what's coming. You know he's going to run it up the middle for 2 yards. It's predictable. With the Chiefs, you see, and the Dolphins and teams like that, you see guys going back and forth, and that creates confusion in the defense, and you got to have that in today's NFL. And with Matt Ryan, you just can't go that route. And I love Matt Ryan, but you got to go to a younger, more agile, mobile quarterback.
So the Falcons' final 7 games on the schedule: Saints, Raiders, Saints again, Chargers, Buccaneers, Chiefs, and Buccaneers. So they do have a lot of division games in there that they can win.
I see one win, maybe against the Chargers. That's my honest thoughts.
I know you guys think they should blow it up, but they do have, I think, 4 division games in there. So technically you go 4-0. There's a chance for the Atlanta Falcons. I have
they're
one
not
more.
Sweeping the Bucs.
No,
they're not sweeping the Bucs or the Saints.
I have one more topic for the NFL guys, and because we had Greg Bell, former great NFL running back, on the podcast, on the radio show, this is a big running back themed question. So Dalvin Cook on the Minnesota Vikings had a game and a half this Sunday. He put up 206 yards and 2 touchdowns on 22 carries. The Vikings won the game 34-20. Right now, it looks like Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry are the 2 best backs in the league, with McCaffrey sidelined. So this is sort of a 2-part question. And Jake, I want to start with you. Does Dalvin Cook's recent play warrant him MVP consideration? And can a team with a running back as their biggest offensive weapon, like the Titans, win a Super Bowl in today's NFL?
Well, it does warrant MVP consideration in my mind. I'm not saying it means he's going to win it, but it does mean he gets a few votes, and I feel as though he does deserve that. But the problem is the MVP is predominantly a quarterback winning position. That's just what happens. That's okay, but that's just the way it is. I mean, you look in the history of MVPs, it's far and few between. It's usually going to be your quarterbacks. That's just the way it goes because the quarterbacks, they command the offense. They're the big name. That's just how it goes, and that's okay. So does it warrant some consideration? Absolutely. I feel as though he's going to get some votes, and he should. It's absolutely right. But right now, it's still probably Russell Wilson. He's been unbelievable. But again, does deserve some votes, no doubt about that. And then can a team that's running back basically dependent like the Titans win? I don't know that they can. I like the idea, but the problem is it can be really easy to shut down a run game as opposed to a pass game. I feel it's easier to shut down a run game. If you get that offensive line, you can't get an offensive line going. Look what happens, right? Look at the Giants with Saquon Barkley. I love Saquon, but you look what happened in the early beginnings of the season, right? Offensive line doesn't play well. Run game does nothing. And I'm not saying you're going to have that with a team like the Titans, but I am saying if you get pressure early or even get up to an early lead, let's say you're up 14-0 early, right? You see teams that go straight to a passing game now because they can't waste the time on the clock to run the ball. And that is an issue I feel like you'll really run into if the team gets out on them and trounces them early, right? You look at what just happened with the Buccaneers this weekend, right? They were getting killed. They ran the least amount of run plays. I believe they ran 5 running plays, which is a record for the least amount in a single game. Now, they're not a run-dependent team, of course, but you look what happens when a team gets a lead on them. That's what's going to happen. They can't run the ball as much in terms of not wanting to waste time on the clock. So while yes, they're important, they're not the end all be all, at least in my mind. JB, you're making a face. What?
You say you're a Giant fan. Do you know Giants history? Our first 2 Super Bowls. Do you remember how we won them? I know the NFL is different now, but
I was going to say it's a little different from then.
Oh, it's way different. But the concept.
You're right. We did have a good run game.
The concept was when we played the Bills to run the ball and keep the ball out of their explosive offense hands.
When we beat the Bills, they beat themselves because they missed a field goal. I hate to say it.
There was more than that.
Would not miss that field goal. That game was very likely to have gone the other way.
But the reason why the game was close is because of the run game. We held the ball most of the game. You could still do that in the NFL if you have a good offensive line and a great running back. The Titans could do that, and you could control the game. That's how you beat Mahomes. You're not going to beat Mahomes by giving him the ball, by going 3 and out because you're not accurately passing. You have to run the ball, and you have to run the ball well. Now,
look at the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's not easy to do, but the Giants did it twice, in 2 Super Bowls in 86 and 90, and that's why they won their 2 Super Bowls. And they did it, throughout the whole playoffs when they in those 2 runs.
And the Niners held down the Chiefs most of that game because they did that exact thing. That's how the Giants beat the Patriots. They were able to keep it away from Brady, get pressure on him with 4 defensive linemen. Playing football old school like that can win you Super Bowls.
In those Super Bowls, the Giants' run game was nothing special. Against Brady, I hate to say it was not. That was not what won them the game. The defense won the game. I know what you're saying. Right, but this has to be said. Our run game was far from special. I agree with JB on the first 2. The last 2, I watched them myself. Our run game was
I'm not talking about those.
They didn't have the ball quite as much as they would like to have.
I'll tell you guys this, and then we can move on to another sport. But in regards to star running backs winning Super Bowls, we haven't seen that in a while. The Super Bowl that comes the closest in my mind recently, as far as a team being run first, the 2019 Patriots were nothing special on offense, if you guys remember. Their defense was elite. They had guys like Sony Michel, who was actually playing really well that year, Rex Burkhead, James White. Pretty much their running game now was the same in 2019, but they relied on it a lot more, and Brady wasn't asked to do much. So in that Super Bowl against the Rams, they scored 1 touchdown. It was a Sony Michel run. Michel had 18 carries for 94 yards. He averaged 5.2 yards a carries. Burkhead had 43 yards. He averaged 6.1 yards a carry on 7 carries. So they didn't have a star running back per se, but they were a run-first team, and that's the last team that I can remember. Its passing game was an elite that won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, fair enough. But that goes on the defense. But I know what you're saying. But just to clarify, that did go on the defense. I'm not taking away your point, but I know exactly what you mean. But
typically, whenever you have a run game, you're going to have a strong defense.
No, absolutely.
Like the Baltimore Ravens or Niners.
I know what you mean.
Right. The great running game can't work if your defense is the Seattle Seahawks defense currently letting up 40 points a game.
This is true.
I just want to move it along real quick because I heard we had a really big listener last week. Jake, who was listening to the show last week?
I guess Gary Bettman must have been listening to us. And we called this happening, which is what's funny. We said last week that we knew what would happen was, and JB said this specifically. We had an idea of what the NHL would do, and they came out with a potential plan. And Gary Bettman, as we predicted, clearly was listening to the show and is deciding we're not going to get any credit. He's going to take it all upon himself and give himself the credit for this. The NHL is currently exploring temporary realignment of the divisions, and more importantly, what we mentioned, short-term hubs for the next season. The NHL is specifically doing exactly what we mentioned, which is they said they'll stay in a bubble for about 10 to 12 days, so they'll play a bunch of games in that span. They'll go home for about a week, get to see their family, get a little bit of rest, whatever, maybe do some, get to the practice facilities, whatever. They'll do the regular testing, and then they'll go back into a new bubble with X amount of teams, however many it ends up being. They're not sure yet. Possibly no fans if that's what they need to do. And then they will play the games and then do it all over again. Clearly Gary Bettman was listening and just doesn't want to give us the credit. Whatever, but regardless.
Gary, I called you last week on this.
This is why Jake is our hockey expert. He has all the scoop. He has all the inside info.
I give JB some credit for calling this one, though.
I just knew it. I knew Gary. Listen, he's a smart man, and smart men listen to us. That's really what it comes down to.
True.
I'll give you that. And the last thing I want to say, just tiny little information. They're looking to start at the beginning of January, which we knew, but their aiming start date is about January 1st at the moment. But again, still trying to figure things out. But that's it for us in the NHL.
Real quick, NBA. Looking to start December 22nd. One of the things we were talking about before the show, me and Spenser, the Hawks possibly trading the number 6 pick for Jrue Holiday. Off the top of my head, Jrue's not going to take them where they need to go.
No.
Got Trae Young. Let's stick with the young guys, use the number 6 pick, and build a nice core. And that's how you do it. What do you guys think real quick? Because I want to get a little baseball before we wrap up.
I definitely don't think that the Hawks are a veteran player away, and that's the report that they're looking for veteran help. And Shams Charania doesn't think it's a coincidence that the Pelicans are openly shopping Jrue Holiday. But no, this team is nowhere close to being a contender in the East. They need a few more pieces. I don't love – they have a lot of decent young wings, but I think they need a few more guys before they can contend with the likes of the Bucks, the Celtics, the Heat, all those juggernauts in the East.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, it's a nice idea, but at the same time, it's not going to do them any good. They'll waste their money on an older guy that's not going to do them much. Save your pick, get a young guy, develop him, give Trae Young a sidekick, and you'll be good maybe.
Hopefully the Hawks GM is listening like Gary Bettman, and they'll make the right decision. So, John, we were having this talk today on Facebook. Let's get to it. Let's wrap up.
We can't do this in 4 minutes. There's no way we do this.
We're going to tease it right now in 4 minutes.
Tease it right now.
And we're going to come back next week to this because Greg ran a little long. So, Barry Bonds, Hall of Fame or not?
Oh, man, no way. There's just no way.
No way? Not even.
John, you're on crazy pills again this week.
There's no way you can put him in the Hall of Fame at this point. There's just no way.
Here's what I want to ask. Pete Rose, Hall of Fame, yes or no?
Oh, of course. He should.
Hold on. So another cheater gets in, but not him? What?
But he did not.
Allegedly, know that.
He did not allegedly take any performance-enhancing drugs.
That's not what I'm.
Bet on the game. Which betting is legal today, so we really should just put him in the.
One's a cheater, the other's a cheater. What's the difference on what they did? They both cheated. They did things wrong.
And Pete Rose broke the laws of baseball and the laws of the land because gambling was illegal at that time. Barry Bonds didn't do either one kind of. Well, at least the laws of baseball. Steroids were not outlawed.
They were frowned upon.
If he did steroids, which nobody knows.
My lips are sealed until next week. My lips are sealed on this.
Quick take. If you can hit a baseball as far as Barry Bonds was able to hit a baseball, I don't care what drugs you're on. I think you should be in the Hall of Fame.
That's also fair enough.
You'll hear more from me next week on this.
All I'm going to say is remember back to when he was with the Pirates. Best player of the game.
Let's go to Tony La Russa. I want to talk a little Tony La Russa. We'll go circle back to Bonds and Pete Rose next week, but I want to talk a little Tony La Russa. What in the world is he thinking with those comments? Thinking he's above the law.
He was drunk and he wasn't thinking. That's it. That's all I got to say.
So as much as we want to blame Tony La Russa, the White Sox knew about all this and they hired him regardless. Yeah, they absolutely knew about this. I don't think that, unless I read the article wrong, they were very aware of his arrest and they decided to go through with it anyway. And that just goes to show you, I mean, how valuable is a 76-year-old Tony La Russa who's getting DUIs? I don't understand.
He sounds like he must be, like the Michael Jordan of coaching at that point. If they're going to really take that risk, I mean, what's up with that?
Yeah, but is that worse than what the Red Sox did?
Yeah, because you could kill somebody.
Yeah,
cheating, but you could actually kill somebody by.
No, I'm talking about baseball wise. I'm not talking about life. Nobody should ever drink and drive. I'm talking baseball wise.
Okay.
Baseball wise, absolutely not.
If you're saying you're hiring a manager based off character, then no, I don't think it's a great hire if the guy got a DUI in the last year.
Right, that looks pretty bad on him.
Not for a young
team. The fact that he got the DUI, it's what he said about it when he was getting in trouble that makes it even worse. Basically saying, do you know who I am? Excuse you. I'm Tony La Russa. What's wrong with you? I can do what I want. That's basically what he's getting at, which is just completely ridiculous.
I'm a Hall of Famer baseball person. And it said, with a BAC over the legal limit, he said, what makes you think I don't have control of my facilities?
I mean, spot the lie there, though, guys. He is a famous Hall of Famer baseball person.
Good for you, but it doesn't give you the right to act above the law.
Maybe he wanted the officer to know who he was.
I loved his response when they tried to give him a breath test. He just said, I don't trust it.
He showed him his World Series ring.
Listen, anytime a cop comes up to you and asks you if they can give you something, just respond, I don't trust it. Pretend like they didn't ask.
All right. So that's our advice for the week, I guess.
So we're saying that the White Sox are worse than baseball-wise, not character-wise. The White Sox are worse than the Red Sox in this one.
Baseball-wise, I say the Red Sox are worse.
Baseball-wise, I think the Red Sox are.
But when you're talking about character, to the White Sox.
A cheat or a guy who has a legitimate problem because maybe he's an alcoholic.
But baseball-wise, I will give it to the Red Sox. But if I had to say who was worse, just period, absolutely the White Sox.
I agree with Jake.
One is cheating in a sport, which is not going to kill anybody. The other is drunk driving, which we all know kills millions of people per year. That's really stupid indeed.
We know a lot of teams in sports hire guys that have histories like this, so
it doesn't make it right either, though.
Right, exactly.
You're right.
And I'm not going to say that the cheating didn't kill anyone. Ask anyone that gambles. The guy could have lost too much. Then he could be going after him. You don't know. He could have lost his wife, his family because he bet too much. And because of the cheating, that affected a lot of games. So
speaking of betting and gambling, you guys are going to want to check out our Sunday show from 12 to 1. That show is going to be a great show. We're going to talk all the lines, all our locks of the week, all of our games that we're picking for the week, our plus, minus, all that good fun stuff with Jeff Cadillac.
Yes, we have Jeff back this week.
Jeff Cadillac, my man. But I think that's about it for this week, for this edition of Journey with the Jays on Real 1100, Facebook Live, YouTube Live. Don't forget to check out the program to get a full interview with Greg Bell. Jake, where can we see you at?
You can find me on Twitter at Jake_Malik. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you find people. JB?
Yeah, I'm JB_the program on Twitter and also the program on the Believe Network. John?
Yeah, you can find me, obviously, here, Real 1100 AM. You can find me on Podbean, search Perch Sports Talk, and find me on Fantasy and Flavors. Thursdays from 7 to 8, you can find me on there representing the Baltimore Ravens professionally.
You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Saw42. You can listen to either of my podcasts on Apple Podcasts, The Last Resort, and Fireside Nets with Spen and Nick.
Guys, it's been fun. Again, we're on Real 1100 Facebook Live and YouTube. Thursdays on the radio, 6 to 7. Facebook and YouTube Tuesdays. John, for you, Dolphins jersey tonight. Great win last week. We're out, guys.